live here on Times Radio Drive. But let's talk now to Hugo Swire, Conservative peer and former Minister of State at the Foreign Office. Good afternoon to you, Lord Swire.
Good afternoon, Carol.
Let me ask you, first of all, for your reaction to what we heard there from the government spokesperson, David Mencer. Essentially, he was saying that the only people who died in that strike on a school, he said it was now a former school, were what he called terrorists.
Well, it's certainly a former school. It's a former something because it's a pile of rubble in which we are led to believe 93 people, I think, were killed, including women and children. And is the spokesman for the Israeli government really saying that 93 people weren't killed, or fewer people were killed, and all those who were killed were all, in his words, terrorists? Is that what we're being asked
he was
to
saying
believe?
that what he was saying is that there were 31 dead and that those were terrorists.
Well, you'll forgive my skepticism about that comment. Each and every time it seems that there is an attack on any kind of school or mosque or whatever else is in Gaza, we're told by the Israeli spokesman that it was Hamas terrorists they were killing, and they're ignoring the fact that thousands and thousands of women and children have been killed in Gaza. I had a meeting with an aid worker a month or so ago, and her stories of what actually was going on the ground were absolutely harrowing. And I think where he's right is, we should be cautious about accepting these figures from Hamas in particular until they're verified. The problem is we can't really verify those figures because no one can really get into Gaza, so to do.
Yeah, indeed. And as I pointed out to David Mencer, neither the Times nor most other independent journalistic organisations are able to independently report from Gaza. Let me ask you about the statement that we've had from Sir Keir Starmer,
Sure.
along with Olaf Scholz and President Macron, saying that these negotiations should resume without further delay. Do you think there is a prospect now of those negotiations resuming this week and of them actually achieving something?
Well, I think that's very much up to the Israeli government because, of course, what we shouldn't forget is since May the 31st, there has been a UN Security Council approved resolution unanimously adopted on the Biden plan, and which was a three-phase plan, which we can go into if you like. And that hasn't been implemented because Israel, we're now led to believe, is trying to move the goalposts a bit on two things. One, on the question of what we call the Philadelphia corridor, and the second thing on the screening of Palestinians returning to northern Gaza. These are two things they've introduced. And I think the Hamas side feel that every time they agree to something, Israel slightly introduces these caveats, and that further delays and allows Israel to go in harder and harder into Gaza. And at some point, there's going to be just nothing left of Gaza. I don't know if you've been to Gaza. I've been to Gaza twice. And it's a very narrow strip of land. And I'm led to believe that it's absolutely destroyed beyond recognition now.
Yeah, I haven't been there for many years. Do you think that Benjamin Netanyahu, because of his precarious political situation, actually doesn't want this war to end in Gaza?
Well, I think he's got people like Mr. Smotrich, or I think that's how you pronounce his name, on the right, and others who are pulling him in one direction. But look, for me, the game changer is what happens now with Iran, which you alluded to earlier on at the beginning of your piece. I do not think Israel is right to be doing what it is doing in Gaza. I feel extremely strongly about it. I was one of the first people on the conservative side of the House to call for an immediate ceasefire. I think is absolutely harrowing and horrific what is going on there. However, I caveat that by saying I do believe in the right of the state of Israel to exist, and I want it to exist, and I want it to succeed. And therefore, I do believe that we should be supportive of Israel's right to defend her own borders against Iran or an Iran proxy such as Hezbollah.
And we've been hearing for several days now about the prospects of a reprisal by Iran for that attack on a Hamas leader by Israel that was carried out on Iranian soil in Tehran. how great do you think is the risk of some large scale counter attack by Iran and of that leading to the wider escalation that so many fear?
Well, I think, following the death of Ismail Haniyeh, or the killing of Ismail Haniyeh, the Iranians are going to have to want to be seen to be doing something. I think it's astonishing that Hezbollah has not done something already, and I think that's probably behind the scenes pressure on Iran, particularly from the Americans, not to open up another flank to this. But I do think they are likely to do something. Israel is well defended with its dome. The Congress have voted, or the Americans have voted another $3.5 billion worth of military equipment to Israel in the last few days. So they're obviously concerned. But the prospect of an all-out war in that part of the world is absolutely terrifying, because it has the possibility to ignite something far wider afield. And I think the listeners just want to remember the vulnerability of Israel. I mean, Israel is, again, I said Gaza is a very small strip. Well, Israel is also an extraordinarily small country, surrounded by some extremely hostile neighbors, such as, obviously Syria, and clearly Hezbollah in the southern part of Lebanon. So the sense of siege in Israel is palpable and makes them extremely nervous. But they will fight tooth and nail to defend their country, and that could have disastrous effects. So on the one hand, you've got the majority of people wanting to support Israel if Israel is attacked by a third party, who don't support what Israel is doing in the Gaza Strip, and that is certainly my position.
Hugo Swire, Conservative peer, former Foreign Office Minister, thanks so much for talking to us.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks.
Let's bring in Tim Marshall, former foreign correspondent and author. Tim, good afternoon to you.
Hello, Carl.
You were hearing from Hugo Swire there, the concerns that the prospect of a wider escalation of this retaliation from Iran leading to a wider conflict, absolutely terrifying, he described it. How real do you think that prospect is?
We're on the edge of potentially finding out. Once we'd got past the first 2 or 3 days after the assassination of Haniyeh in Tehran, it was then a matter of time. How long do the Iranians want to put together whatever it is they're going to do? I could take you back to April. After the Israelis hit a Revolutionary Guard compound in the consulate in Damascus, it took the Iranians 12 days before they hit back with those 300 missiles that they sent to Israel. Well, it's the 12th day today. Tomorrow is a Jewish holiday, the 9th of Av. It's a day of mourning, I believe. So if you want symbolism and you want a time frame, we are approaching the time of finding out. And I think that the explanation for Hezbollah not taking even more serious action, that they actually did fire 30 rockets into Israel yesterday. The signs are of a coordinated attack, that if and when Iran does anything, it will do it at the same time that Hezbollah does something, at the same time that possibly the Houthis do, at the same time that their proxies in Syria and Iraq do. And if they're all firing missiles at the same time, there's 2 things that can happen. One, if they're firing them at the Americans in Syria and Iraq, which happened to a very small extent in April, they're very easily able to deal with it. But the more they fire there, the more the Americans are drawn away and defending their own troops. That leaves Israel open to be overwhelmed because their defense system cannot handle that amount of weapons. And I'm not saying that's what's going to happen. I'm saying we're on the edge of the time frame for that happening.
Well, let me ask you about this joint statement we've had from Britain, France and Germany, urging Iran not to retaliate, echoing what the US said, the US also sending a submarine into the region. Is any of this actually going to deter Tehran?
Well, the latter, potentially, the former, not at all. And I mean, no disrespect to the leaders of the 3 countries you've mentioned, but they are not peripheral players, but they are not the key players. The key players are the Americans and the people in the region. So I don't think it makes a difference. As far as the hostages are concerned, it's nothing to do with their statement. It's to do already over the weekend. We learned that it's likely unless something massive happens in the next couple of days, that the hostage negotiations will go back on Thursday, either in Cairo or Qatar. Bill Burns, the CIA head, is already flying to the region in preparation for this. As for the submarine, yeah, it's interesting. It's the USS Georgia. Now, there's two things about that. One, it's going to arrive round about this, probably just before, in preparation for the arrival of the USS Abraham Lincoln. That's an aircraft carrier group, which is there to relieve another aircraft carrier group. But the point is they would then have two aircraft carriers with an awful lot of firepower and the potential to bring down missiles to defend Israel. But secondly, back to the sub, it's got two things on it. It's got 150 cruise missiles, which is a bit of a large stick to be carrying around to say, if things get out of hand, we've got this extra firepower. But also it has it has the ability to have special forces on board and can get them ashore quite secretly. So I think that's the signal that they're sending. As I said, we're not there yet. I think it's a crucial time because it took them 12 days last time. It's now 12 days this time. There are lots of other options that Israel's enemies have, including striking embassies around the
Yeah.
world. But, we are all on tenterhooks because, as Mr. Swire explained, if this happens over the next few days, Israel then has its choice, what it does, and then we're into the escalatory ladder.